Are ordinary employees. They are not entrepreneurs. They are not people who've invented, created things out of their own imagination. I think people feel very differently about the James Dyson, well, before he started outsourcing, people who've clearly created something out of nothing themselves. Good on you, they say, let them have as much as they want, well, within the limits of income tax, which I would set higher. But I do think that the boardroom culture, I think people understand very well that it's an outrageous cheat and a con, that their pay is rising in leaps and bounds even after the crash, let alone before. The rate at which it rose last year, 55% on average in the FTSE 100, is sort of beyond anybody's imagining or reckoning. And we went through 13 years of a Labour government that not only did nothing, it said nothing. And time after time, Blair and Brown would go along to the Mansion House and on bended knee and tell them they were wonderful, and Brown, just before the crash, said, this is the golden age that you have delivered to us. And everybody knows that it's a cheat law, but there's a kind of sense of helplessness. And part of the reason people don't vote, part of the reason people feel so cynical and so detached from the whole political process, is that they know it simply doesn't engage in any sense with the real power in the land, which is with money, with banks, and in those boardrooms. And until politicians get a grip on that and understand that it matters for their own credibility, we won't get back to any sense of engagement with democracy.
And very briefly, positive discrimination.
Yeah. Oh, I'm all for positive discrimination. There's no doubt that we wouldn't have 37% of Labour MPs being women if it weren't for all-women shortlists. And you should do that sort of thing wherever there is great disproportion, whether it's judges in the professions, wherever it is. I think, it's the only way to go when we've had, all the years since I was young, believing that that non-discrimination act, anti-discrimination acts and equal pay acts would do the business for us. It doesn't. In the end, you need bigger muscle than that.
Okay, Ruth Lister, I was wondering if you could take on the gentleman's question about dependents and the poor.
Absolutely. The language of welfare dependency was, I think, one of the most pernicious things under New Labour, constantly talking about welfare dependency, a dependency culture. There is no evidence to support the idea that people living in poverty are living in a dependency culture. There may be a very small number. Most people living on benefit would like to be in paid work if there were decent paid work available, if the barriers to paid work, such as lack of childcare and so forth and poor transport, weren't there. It's now driving the welfare reform agenda, leading to punitive cuts such as a benefit cap, which says that no one should have more than the average wage, not the average income, because they ignore what benefits people get in work. And I hate to say that my party is supporting the principle of a benefit cap. And it's this notion of welfare dependency which I think divides people living on benefit off from the wider population. I'd just also like to say add something about high pay. I mean, like Polly, I don't know nothing about the football pitch, but we use the minimum wage legislation to regulate wages. Why can't we think about maximum wage regulation? David Cameron, when he asked Will Hutton to look at the question of high pay in the public sector, raised the idea about a pay ratio. Well, why can't we have a pay ratio throughout private as well as public sector and enshrine it in legislation?
Chuka Umunna, why can't we?
Sorry.
I knew
you are the shadow
come
business
straight
minister, as
to
John
me
reminds
after
me.
That question. I'm not in favour of having a maximum ratio because I'm not sure how workable it would be, or whether actually it'd do what we want it to do, which is to produce better outcomes in the economy for the majority of people in this country.
Sorry, I'm going to make your life awkward, Chuck, and I've never done that ever before, but I'm going to. What about the idea of building it into the tax system and incentivising more palatable ratios, which is a much more modest proposal? And you know who I heard that one from? Andrew Neil, that well-known socialist.
I think in terms of reform of corporate governance and considering suggestions like that, I'd encourage people in this room to throw those things into the policy review process we're going through at the moment. I think all options should be on the table and we should consider a range of suggestions. So I'm not closed to any particular idea on that front. I mean, I think we've got a real challenge, and I'm very excited by it, because I think actually we're very well placed as a centre-left movement to answer these questions, which is this. I mean, if you look at where the Labour Party came from, in the mid-1940s, we very much put our faith in the state to deliver better outcomes for people, and God it did, because that's why we have the NHS. Obviously, in the mid-90s, as society evolved and we, very much were promoting a mixed market economy, we were doing more than seeking to show we've reached an accommodation with capitalism in the market. We were actually trying to show, whether this is right or wrong, I'm simply giving a historical account, that we embraced capitalism, almost hook, line and sinker. Now, I'd say our challenge now is different, because I think, yes, we accept capitalism, but actually the problem with the kind of capitalism that we, if you like, bought into in the mid-90s was that we bought all of its aspects, good and bad. And of course, the bad aspects were the ones which led to the asset bubbles, the light touch regulatory regime of financial services. And look where that got us with the 2008 crash. I think what now the challenge is to build a better, good capitalism which serves the majority of people in this country well, which is, entrepreneurial, productive, innovative. One of the reasons that Ed has been talking about the squeezed middle, which he was, kind of ridiculed for doing at the beginning of the year, is because when I say that the capitalist system wasn't really delivering, we had people really since 2003, the mainstream majority in this country were not seeing their wages keep pace with living prices and the rest of it. Productivity was growing at twice the rate of wages. So now the big questions that we have to answer as a movement, and hey, I don't pretend to have all the answers to these questions, is how can we produce a good economy that pays people more money, gives them better and more fulfilling jobs, whilst enabling us to remain competitive with the likes of China and India? And how do we manage to produce our version of the social democratic good society without all the money that was available to us in our 13 years in government? Those are very big challenges. And I actually think we're very well placed to answer those questions, because essentially it does require active government doing things, acting as an enabler, working with people to produce better outcomes. That, of course, runs completely against the ideological thrust of the Conservative-led government. So, yes, we didn't get everything right, but I think actually we're very well placed to get the answers right going forward in the future.
Chuka, we had a question about high pay and we had a question about dependence. A lot of people are asking this question in the last couple of weeks. Was it right of Ed Miliband in his speech last Monday to equate people who misuse benefits with the bankers who wreck the system?
Well, I think what he was... Well, I think what he was saying is that there needs to be responsibility at both the bottom and the top.
But they're not equal, are they, to use the theme of our...
Well, look, I mean, are you asking me... I mean, one of my issues is do I approve of people who cheat the benefit system? And I don't like using that language, actually, no. But equally, I don't approve of, the rewards for failure.
But it's not equally.
Well, if you let me finish, Caroline, I wouldn't agree with that either. But I do think we do have. I mean, what I would accept is I do think there is a problem in this country in the sense of there is a disproportionate amount of attention, if you like, certainly in our tabloid media, that is focused on the benefit cheats, as they use this language, who actually cost the Exchequer about £800 million a year. And when you juxtapose that with the amount that we've put into the banking sector, over 1.3 trillion, they have not given the same amount of column inches in terms of expressing outrage of what is going on there. So,
okay,
I'd accept that.
Caroline, come in.
Well, I was going to say, of course, breaking the law is wrong whichever way you do it, but I would really challenge the idea that there is an equality between somebody who is doing an extra few hours' work to top up their wages because they're trying to put food on the table, and somebody who is deliberately paying extremely rich lawyers to be able to get around tax evasion and tax avoidance.
But Caroline, I'm not actually sure. I mean, you're misinterpreting what Ed said, because that is not what he said. That is not what he said. What he said is that there needs to be...
There needs to be... equally. Sorry, I'm not talking about what Ed Miliband said. I'm talking about what you just said, which may have just been a form of speech. But
it was a form of speech. I'm not saying... I am not saying... It's a form of speech. I'm not saying there is an equality between the two, hence the comments I just made about the media coverage of, so-called benefit cheats. And
very quickly, what's the Green Party solution to controlling high pay in the boardroom and on the pitch?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because at a recent conference we voted to follow the Norwegian model, whereby we want to have at least 40% of women in boardrooms. And that is what we think we should be doing.
Can't have a panel discussion without Scandinavia.
Well, it's just nice to show that it's possible somewhere. That's why I'm citing
Good.
Scandinavia. So that was what
And
we would do
positive
there.
discrimination. Sorry to rush you, because we're running out of time.
Positive discrimination is obviously a fantastic idea in the sense that we need it. If we wait to do things incrementally, if we just wait for the laws of nature, then we will be waiting centuries until there are equal numbers of women in Parliament. Already in Parliament, we have fewer women as a percentage of our Parliament than countries like Rwanda and Afghanistan. You know, we're supposed to be the mother of all parliaments. We are doing atrociously on this. And it actually matters, because when you then look to see what kind of policies come out of that Parliament, it's perhaps not so deeply surprising that you do have cuts that are hitting the poorest, and women most of all, hardest. So I think, you know, it's hugely important to have women properly represented. And I think there's really interesting examples too to show that when it comes to the financial crash, it was those banks, for example, in Iceland that actually did an awful lot better, where they had more control of women because they were less likely to take risks. Now, I don't want to make big gender generalizations, but it is interesting that it's actually good for the system. It's good for the economy to have more women represented, as well as ticking boxes when it comes to positive discrimination. Are you trying to stop me answering these other questions too?
I am, unless you've got something desperate you want to say in 20 seconds.
I want to say to the lady up there, because I absolutely agreed with you so much, that the big society is not accountable. That's the problem with it, or one of the problems with it. You know, if you've got a local council, or if you've got another set of people you've elected, you can vote them out when they do stupid things like saying that girls can't wear trousers, which I just still baffles me. I mean, it's just extraordinary. But the big society is deeply and utterly and inevitably unaccountable, and that's why we should be talking about the good society, not the big society.
Okay, I want to talk about the good. I want to talk about the good society and sustainability. Your questions on climate change. I know the lady at the front is very keen to come in.
I'm a writer on renewable energy, and of course I know we have the greenest government ever. So today on Radio 4, I was really astonished to hear from someone I'd never heard of, the Shadow Environment Minister. So this is a yes or no quiz question for the panel. Can anyone name him or her?
All right. No cheating. I'm going to enforce no. Chuka knows, he can't tell anyone else. Or does Chuka know? Next question, please. Lady here in the shirt, lady here in the blouse, and then the gentleman in the black jacket next.
Hi. My question on the building the good society is how we change the status quo. We have a housing stock that leaks energy appallingly as energy prices are spiraling above inflation. We have more renewable energy resources than anyone else in Europe, yet we have one of the lowest uptakes. And we have a transport system that increasingly relies on cars and all the congestion and traffic and road deaths that they entail. So how, when every poll says people are in favour of a green society, how come we continue to go nowhere near a green society? Okay.
And gentleman at the back?
Yeah, just really following on from what the lady just said before. How do we achieve that sustainable society? You know, as you suggested, huge changes in infrastructure, doing things locally, making things, different kinds of things, making them differently. When culturally we still seem, and educationally, we still seem to value a lawyer and an accountant far more than the kind of engineer or designer or artisan jobs that are actually going to solve any of these problems.
Okay. Take a couple more and then we'll bring back in the panel. Gentleman here with his hand up. And the woman in the blouse, woman in the white top there.
James Gruge, and I run an environmental charity called Environmental Protection UK. It strikes me that environmental justice has fallen off the agenda recently, and when we're thinking about the good society, the tax-funded scheme Warmfront to tackle fuel poverty has been cancelled by this government, and responsibility being pushed to energy companies. Feed-in tariffs, which I support entirely for solar PV, could be regarded as a middle-class subsidy and are not being distributed equitably. When we look at the Green Deal, which is the finance package for home energy efficiency, there's a danger that the big companies will be tackling individuals, let's say middle-class Guardian readers, above, no offence to the Guardian, above other sections of the community. How is the good society going to...